Ralph Nissen called Yeshalcha bincha. It says, Yeshalcha bincha machal leimer, when your son will ask you tomorrow, say, Maha Eidos v'achukim v'mishpat, ma'shetziva Havai Elokeinu, ask, what are these Eidos, chukim, mishpatim that Havai Elokeinu commanded you? Amarta levincha shall tell your son, Avodim einu lepari b'Mitzrayim, we were servants to Pari Mitzrayim, V'tzeinu Hashem Elokeinu Mishram b'Yod and Hashem our God took us out, and they were a strong hand, was roin, a tuya, and an outstretched arm, going Messiah. And he concludes over there, and Hashem commanded us to do all these chukim, the years of Elokeinu, to fear and Hashem our God. Which should be good for us all the days. To give us life like this day. It's known the analysis of this. This question is the question of the Ben Chacham. That God brings us down that when it enumerates the Ben Chacham, the Ben Shady de Elisha, the Ben Tam, etc., it brings different sukkim. It brings this pasuk as the pasuk of the Ben Chacham, and the Rebbe brings a proof. Why and how do we know that this is the question of the Ben Chacham? The proof of this is he knows that the Torah is divided. The Eid is chukim mishpat. The like ben the Chacham, not like the son. That's the opposite of a Chacham. The Rebbe avoids using the negative term. He says in a general way, what's this service for you? In other words, he doesn't distinguish, he doesn't know, he doesn't realize, because he doesn't have the Chacham of the Ben Chacham, that there is the levels of Eidos, there's chukim, there's mishpatim. Also, the Gam Loika Ben Shoimer Beifin Klali and Mazois, and not even like the Tam also doesn't know to divide between them. He just says in a general way, what's this? What's happening? Hello, Yosef Ben Chacham, since he's a Ben Chacham Yedeh, who I just brought look at the Eidos chukim mishpatim, he knows about the different distinctions of Eidos chukim mishpatim. Since we're dealing with a wise son that knows the differences of the and the details of the Torah and its mitzvahs, we need to understand what's his question. Why did Hashem give us these Torah and mitzvahs? In other words, it seems to be, when you look at the answer, that he's not asking for what, as in, what are they? Because the answer is why Hashem gave it to us. He gave it to us because he took us out of Mitzrayim, because we should fear him. So from this, if you work your way backwards, the Maha Eidos v'Chokam Mishpatim is not to identify what the Torah mitzvahs are, not what are they. He knows what they are. He wants to know for what purpose, for what reason were we given these things. So therefore, if he's a Ben Chacham, the Rebbe asks, and he knows about all these things, about all the details, why does he ask even a question? Why did Hashem give us? And they call the Torah, the entire Torah, but Torah Shebeksav, both in the written Torah, Malachas Kamba Torah Shopen, and how much more so in the oral Torah, Malaya, Be'inyan, Kavanas, HaMitzvahs, Char Mitzvahs, is filled with the purpose of the mitzvahs, the reward for the mitzvahs. What room is there for a question? What are the Eidos, the chukim mishpatim that Havai Elokeinu commanded you? In other words, why are we doing this? What do you mean? It says, he knows what it says. He says, if you'll do it, then Hashem will reward you and take you into Eretz Yisrael, and you'll be able to stay over there, etc., etc. So he knows about all these things. That's one question that I've asked. Another thing we need to understand, it says, you will relate to your son that we were servants. By commanded us to do all these chukim to fear. So the question is, what's the connection between avodim hayinu, to vaitzavenu Hashem, to do all the chukim. The l'chura, seemingly, the response to the question, Maha Eidis Vachukim Amishpat Mashatziv V'Goyim. What or for what reason are we doing it so? So what's the response to that? The response is the part that says, "Vayitzaveinu Avaya Lasses Kol Chukim Eila." The Avaya commanded us to do all these chukim. Why? Le'yira, we should fear him. And what's the benefit of that? L'toiv lanu kol hayamin, so it should be good for us all the days. So the question is, where does that avodim come? Why is he prefaced in the response that we were avodim, we were servants, slaves to Parim Mitzrayim? In another question, we need to understand top of the next page. The question was, what's the Eidus, Chukim, and Mishpatim, which are the three types of mitzvahs? Testimonials, which are celebratory of certain events, like Yitzis Mitzrayim and Shabbos. Then there's Chukim, which are a super rational thing. And then there's Mishpatim, which are civil laws, rational laws. But that's in the question of the Ben Chacham. But on the response, who the response to the Ben Chacham is, Avaya commanded us to do all the Chukim. So he doesn't say anything about Eidus and Mishpatim. The Lechura is a minor Rakal Hashayla Bina Chukim. Seemingly, it's a response only concerning the super rational laws, the Chukim. Therefore, the question still remains concerning the command concerning Eidus and Mishpat. There's a sum up. There's a few questions of it. One thing is the Ben Chacham knows about Torah mitzvahs. He knows about Eidus, Chukim, Mishpatim. So why does he even ask what the purpose is in it? He knows throughout the Torah and through written and oral that it writes about all these different things. Second thing is, why does he have to preface it with saying, when he says that Hashem commanded it to us, fear him, and that should be good for us, why does he have to preface it with the idea that Avodim Hayinu? The third thing is that in the question he asked about Eidus, Chukim, Mishpatim, all the three types of mitzvahs. And in the answer, all he talks about is that Hashem commanded us the Chukim, doesn't talk about the rest of the mitzvah. Ois Beis, line 6, page 1. In a close the Kudus Habir was the general point of the explanation. This is Yosef ben Chacham, since he's a wise son, Yedeyahu Inyan Torah mitzvah. He knows the idea of Torah and mitzvahs. By the way, I remember correctly, the Rebbe in his commentary on the Haggadah says that the word Ben over here, as in Ben Chacham and the Arba Bonim, it doesn't necessarily mean little kids sitting by the table. You have your 10-year-old kid that's asking the question. You have your 12-year-old, and you have your precocious 15-year-old. That's not what Ben necessarily means over here. But rather, Ben is in a more general term. Like there's Ben Olam Haba we have throughout Chazal. We have Ben Choyrim. Bar Mitzvah is also Ben, and everybody is a Bar Mitzvah once they became Bar Mitzvah. It's not just I'm a bar mitzvah, a ben mitzvah, in other words, for my teenage years. Until 120, I'm a bar mitzvah. I ask bar mitzvah, I'm someone that's obligated in the mitzvah. So therefore, a lot of times we have these pictures in our heads from when we learned the Haggadah initially. Oh, we have these 4 kids sitting by the table. This guy is playing with toys under the table. We should be listening to Haggadah. And this guy is this really smart kid. That's not what we're talking about over here necessarily. We're talking about 4 different attendees by the Seder. And each one looks at the Seder through different lenses. So now the Ben Chacham, the sage, the wise, quote unquote child, the wise person, he knows the idea of Torah mitzvahs. And what does he know about Torah mitzvahs? He's a Chassidish Bacher, he's a Chassidish man, he's a Alter Chassid, whatever. He knows mitzvah lashon savsa, mitzvahs and the word in Aramaic together. Shaydei ha-mitzvahs nasa savsa b'chibur mitzvah mitzvahs. Through the mitzvahs becomes togetherness and joining with the one that commands the mitzvahs. Valach has come v'kap v'negel Torah. How much more so concerning when it comes to Torah, that how much the bond is created between a Yid and Hashem when he's studying Torah, even more so than when he's doing a mitzvah. Why do we say that's more so? But Tanya, like explain in Tanya by Milos, mitzvahs, in the advantage and quality of Torah study over the fulfillment of mitzvahs. The mitzvahs, which are the 248 commandments, these are the 248 limbs and organs of the king. So therefore, when we are doing a mitzvah, we are connecting like the body connects with the soul. There's a chayis alaki of Hashem that goes into every mitzvah, just like there's a chayis of the nefesh that goes into every limb and organ of my body. But Masha'enkin HaTorah, as opposed to Torah's connection with Hashem, that is much higher. It's saying it's higher than this. Torah and Hashem are entirely one. It's not just like the limbs of the king that are, if you will, extremities and externalities of the king, but it's a bond with Hashem's essential core. Like the mitzvahs are. So therefore, knows about these things. He knows that a mitzvah bonds him with Hashem, and Torah bonds him with Hashem even more so. So the question of the Ben Chacham is as follows: line 15. The content of his question is: how does one accomplish the togetherness and the joining with Hashem? Ask him that Hashem, your God, commanded you. Through the Eidos and Chukim Mishpatim, how are they performed? They're performed, first of all, with a body. Secondly, they're performed with physical matter. Like talking about mitzvahs are supposed to accomplish such a great thing. Joining with Hashem, connecting with Hashem, tzafsa v'chibur. The lechura, the inyan that tzafsa v'chibur chashayich ma'kadosh baruch hu yoisrai de avodas hamasiris nefesh. Seemingly, where do you really have the togetherness and joining with Hashem? Through the avodah of self-sacrifice, the avodah ruchnis, through a spiritual avodah, the avodah nefesh alakis, through the avodah of the godly soul. But not through Eidos Chukim Mishpatim in physical matters. You don't expect that a physical thing will be able to do this thing of a mitzvah, of a joining together with Hashem. And that is the question of the Ben Chacham. How can you say that we can join Asher Tsiva Hashem Lakeinu Hashem? Tsiva is from the one joining through Eidos Chukim Mishpatim, physical things. How can you be joined with Hashem? I can devote myself to Hashem. I can have this love and self-sacrifice to Hashem. That I understand. But physical things, that I don't understand. Yes, lahoisiv, top of page Zayin, but beer dear kaloshin, Eidos Chukim Mishpatim Davkin. The Rebbe is going to go on a very interesting analysis of these three things, that these three expressions, each one of them is actually the Rebbe is going to take to mean how low the mitzvahs are, the physical mitzvahs are. And because they're so low, so that strengthens the question that the Ben Chacham has: how is it possible that in such a low type of thing, as Eidos is considered something low, as we'll explain, Mishpatim is considered something low, as we'll explain, and even Chukim, which usually in other places the Chassidus talk about Chukim, the word Chakika, etc., etc. The Rebbe is going to bring the negative aspect of Chakika, that something so low, how can it be a way of tzafsa v'chibur with Hashem? Any questions before we go on? Continue. So he's saying, line 2 on page Zayin, Shloisha l'shoynes elam, these three expressions of Eidos Chukim Mishpatim moedim al darga b'chusa b'kima mitzvahs gufa, they indicate a low level in the fulfillment of mitzvahs themselves. The idea behind this is, how and in what way do these three expressions indicate a low level of mitzvahs, and therefore He's asking, how can this bonding with Hashem? In a Indian Eidus Shaykh Dafkal Dover Shenanida Begol, idea of Eidus, what's the meaning of testimony? Testimony applies for something that's not open and revealed. To such a degree, Aval Achafilu Badover She'ene Nira Ata Aval Zel Milsa Davida Li Gluye La'achazman, even something that is not visible now, but it's something that eventually will become revealed. Ein Sarach was a Eidus. One does not need testimony for this. Testimony, the Torah only applies for a thing that, if not for the testimony of the witnesses, would remain concealed. On something that the Chazal called a milsa David legluya, a matter that will eventually become revealed, the Chazal did not ask for testimony, or did not say, or testimony is not applied. So therefore, what does that have to do with our topic? Line 8. Moving from this, it's understood. Inyan Eidus Shebekiyam mitzvahs, the idea of testimony in the fulfillment of mitzvahs. Moira, this is the case. Sha'odar Makaimon B'Maimed Matzav Chinyani Elakusim Afilo like Milsa David Legluya. That the person that's fulfilling it, he needs a testimony. He needs something to testify to godliness. Godliness is so distant from him that it's so concealed from him that it's not even considered something that will eventually become revealed. And the mitzvah that he's fulfilling is only like a testimony for it. So what do we see over here? We see how low the idea of testimony is, of mitzvahs, calling them edus. And he goes on further. It says, edus, chukim, mishpatim. He goes in the order of the pasuk, line 12. In a similar vein, chukim from the expression engraving. Though in most of our Chassidus, the Rebbe talks about chukah, and shows on how deeply engraved it's part of the person, it's part of its very essence, it's engraved like the stone, and the letters are not two separate things. That shows on the unity and the bond. Here the Rebbe is finding a negative over here. Engraving needs much more effort. It takes a lot more energy with the power of a person's action than if you were to write something. How much more so in the idea of saying. So again, in the previous mimer we had something that's in the oral Torah that said, it's only said. Then there's written. That's a greater unity because the ink and the parchment are together. And engraving, like Taseres HaDibros, that's the greatest. Here it's just the opposite. Amira saying takes no effort. Writing takes very little effort. Engraving, that takes so much effort. So what does it indicate about how low the mitzvah is? Moving line 15, for this is understood. The idea of chukim, that's a mitzvah, it indicates that the person that's fulfilling them is in such a state and situation. So that it should be received by him. The idea of the fulfillment of the command of Hashem is God, of our God. It's necessary to engrave it with a lot of toil, a lot of effort. I really need to work on myself to fulfill Hashem's mitzvahs. Obviously, it shows on how distant the person is from Hashem. And the Rebbe connects this explanation with what we always say, that chukim is talking about mitzvahs that are super rational. So he says, line 19, chukim are also those mitzvahs that the Satan and the nations of the world tease the Yidden and annoy the Yidden with. What does that mean? Because they're saying it makes no sense, it's illogical, why do you do this? What does that mean? Not only are the mitzvahs that are called chukim not rational. They're the opposite of rational thought. One of the famous explanations is about Paraduma, the one that is sprinkled on him, the Paraduma, he becomes tired. The one that does the sprinkling, who was originally tired, now becomes tummy. There's other contrary to Seichel, not just not understood, but the opposite of Seichel issues in other mitzvahs of our chukim. The apple became, and despite the irrationality or the anti-rationality of those mitzvahs called chukim, Mekayim Moisam, he still fulfills them. Except this understood. Sha'adam HaMekayimon u'b'mayim d'matzav sha'aseichel shaloi omer lahep. The person that's fulfilling them is in such a state where the brain is like telling him, "What are you doing this for? Well, don't do this." And he's still doing it because he's like toiling on it. Like when you're engraving something, you toil on it, not like when you say something or you write something. So again, Hukim show how low these mitzvahs are, how far he is from God. Well, that is the mishpatim in a similar vein, mishpatim, the logical mitzvahs. Shem ein yonim hamuvon gam b'seichel anushi, seichel adam, seichel anushi, v'seichel nafshabam is the logical mitzvahs, the civil laws. These are things that are understood in human intellect, in person's intellect, and even the intellect of the animal soul. The spirit of the animal is one that descends below. So even though that the spirit of the animal descends below, this is a mitzvah that he's fulfilling. In other words, such a low level. This understood. The mitzvah descended to being clothed in such a garment. Even from the perspective of the spirit of the animal that descends down below, move on top of Beit Ches. In other words, even an animal that is so low understands that one has to honor his father and mother. The kiyotze b'shara mitzvah sichli is so too, in other intellectually understood mitzvahs. Oy shimiyos in the lashon of the Rambam, mitzvahs that are intellectually understood are called shimiyos. Mitzvahs that can be heard. So the word that we say hearing is also meaning havana v'asad. So they're understood mitzvahs in the crime b'shem mishpatim. So this means, again, the mitzvah came down to such a low thing. It's logical. First we're saying it's so low because it's not logical and he's got to work on himself. Now he's saying it's low because it's logical. Even an animal can understand it. Even the Seichel and Nefshabamis can understand it. So mitzvahs are so low. So v'zoi shaylos ben chacham. That's the question of the chacham. Why do we need specifically Eidos Kokim Mishpatim Shem Rechoikim Kol Kach Mitach Sakavon that seemingly they are so distant from the ultimate purpose, the tzavsa v'chibur mitzvah mitzvahs, to be the joining and togetherness with the one that commands the mitzvahs, v'nois not Torah, the one that gives the Torah. How is a bond, or what's the purpose, and why is a bond formed through mitzvahs that are so low? The Rebbe continues, the question is even more exact, that the Chacham says that Hashem Elokeinu commanded you. This implies you and not us. Not us. That sounds like that other kid that we don't want to mention it. So the Rebbe says, no. It's not like that other kid. The intention over here is not to exclude himself from the whole community of Yidden, like the Haggadah says about the son. That's the opposite of a chacham. That he said, it's to him and not, it's to you and not to him. So why does the Ben Chacham say Eschem? It seems to echo this negative that we have in the question, So the Rebbe says, no, 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 no. There's a different meaning over here in the word eschem. What is the Chacham trying to point out? Ki'im, rather, he's saying, you, that Hashem commanded you, rather, to explain and to strengthen this question. How does the become the togetherness and the joining through these Eidos that you are fulfilling? That you are fulfilling binyanim gashmim in physical matters. Who is the eschem come to exclude? It's not coming to exclude him, chas v'shalom. No, it's coming to exclude the others. The others did not fulfill mitzvahs and gashmis. So he says, "She'ein ze k'may mitzvah shoyu lifnei ze idea others." It's not like the mitzvahs that was prior to this, fulfilled through the others. She'ikir kiyam mitzvahs shoyu beruchni is the main fulfillment of the mitzvahs was spiritually. So that's what it means. What is the reason for the fulfillment and the mitzvahs the way Hashem commanded you, different than the way the others fulfilled it? That's the you coming to exclude, because where the problem is the physical mitzvahs, whereas the others fulfill the mitzvahs in the spiritual. But now the Rebbe is going to explain, but don't we see also a physical manifestation of the mitzvahs by the others? It says, line 17, though also the avoid of the others was connected with a physical matter. For example, the avoid of Abraham, my beloved, midas hachesed, the mid of kindness, that was connected with the literal idea of the physical welcoming guest. So too, the avodah of Yitzchak, his spiritual avodah, was bound up with the physical digging of wells. They represented spiritual things that he accomplished with them. So again, there was a physical activity. The avodah of Yankov was connected with the sticks that he carved out and placed in front of the animals when they drank and they fed. So, and those sticks we know represented the mitzvah of tefillin. They accomplished l'mayla the mitzvah of tefillin. So what's the question? Oh, you have mitzvahs in the physical. But the others didn't. The others also had mitzvahs in the physical. So the Rebbe says a big difference between our physical mitzvahs and the others' physical. Line 23, was only that their actual work was with a physical matter. The effect and the accomplishment wasn't spiritual matter. For example, Abraham, that is, avoid was the bid of love. The whole life in Asaya, Negbai was the way it was going and traveling towards the south, which this explains. The south has to do with the Kava Chesed, because when you're facing Mizrach, the south is on your right. That shows on the right level of Midas HaChesed that he was going up higher and higher in his Avodas Hashem in the spirit of Chesed through the Chesed that he was doing down here. But it wasn't about the physical world; it was about the spiritual world. While there's a Pachad Yitzchak, same too. Yitzchak was going up into levels of Yira of Hashem. While there's a Midas Yankiv was going up in levels of the sphere of Emes that having to do with Tiferes and Rachmim. This means Shavidosam Hois Avodah Ruchnis test, page test. Primarily, their Avodah was a spiritual Avodah. Like the Medrash expressed itself, all the mitzvahs that the others did before you was only like a smell, like a scent. Similar to scent, that only the neshama derives benefit from a scent, not the body. That's why when a person faints, you give him strong smelling salts to bring the neshama down. So therefore, the others did not do anything mainly in the physical. Their avodah was in the spiritual. So we understand, spiritual, that's how you connect with Hashem. As opposed to what Hashem commanded you. It's not like the avodah of the forefathers, specifically the physical mitzvahs. Therefore, it doesn't say what Hashem commanded us, but he says you. The question that he's asking by those that are fulfilling the Eidos Chukim Mishpatim, it's because he understands and makes sense to him that the fulfillment of the mitzvahs has to be the way it was by the Avos. These are also his own forefathers. The incarnate Avos all Shloisha, we only call the Avos the three, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. But like not the way Hashem commanded you, Eidos Chukim Mishpatim. In other words, he includes himself with like he's the offspring of the Avos. He says, if not for the commands that he gave you, I would be like the level of the Avos. I would be fulfilling mitzvahs in the way of the Avos. So therefore, what's the purpose? What's the reason for doing the mitzvahs in such a type of way of the physical mitzvahs?